Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. A bittersweet episode as it's our last episode of the college basketball season. Our last, episode really college-wise. Besides, I'll do some off-season stuff, but till week 0 of next year, college football, college basketball done after this episode. The Final Four episode, and then Joe and I will give our picks for the national title game as well, but Joe, it's been a pretty fun tournament. Not the best, but we got some great, matchups. Sweet 16, Elite Eight. The Final Four, I think, is a little less than exceptional. But I feel like the entire year we've been on this kind of collision course for UConn Purdue national title, and it looks like it's brewing just at the right time. So excited to get into it. The Final Four, obviously, one of if not the biggest events in all of college athletics. So it should be a fun episode, but welcome back, and how are we?
Coyle, I'm fantastic as always. Like you said, bittersweet. Last episode of our college season. We're not going to be sitting here talking about college lacrosse or baseball. But I already looked. We're 142 days away from week 0, August 24th. So we'll be back for, I think that'll be season 5 together.
I think
That's
so.
crazy that I've already known you for even longer than that. But yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a UConn fan, so I want UConn to beat Bama, but I also want Purdue to beat NC State. I know normally I'm rooting for the underdog always, but it's very rare in college basketball that we get to have the two best teams all season long play. I know the COVID year we got Gonzaga Baylor in the national title game. Baylor obviously steamrolled them, but those were the two best teams all season. People wanted them to play. They ended up getting there. It's not often we get the top two teams. And I think if, Houston, if Shed doesn't go down for Houston, I wouldn't be shocked if we have 3 of the 4, like the top 3 teams all making it to the Final Four in Arizona. But, Cole, like you said, I agree. The earlier rounds, there weren't that many great games. But, sometimes you sacrifice that for the awesome Sweet 16 and Elite Eight that we had. I mean, besides UConn, really, there was a really good amount of games in the Sweet 16, Elite Eight. But not every year is going to kind of be like last season where you have FAU, San Diego State, and Miami, and even UConn was a 4 or 5. It was a 4 last year, getting to the Final Four. But these tournaments kind of make you appreciate the pure chaos of March in a way. So I'm happy that UConn's sitting here again at the end, and let's get into it.
Yeah, and at the same time, too, I mean, like, if you started at the beginning of the tournament, a lot of people would have had UConn and Purdue, but a lot of people weren't having Alabama, and a lot of people especially weren't having NC State. But I guess because, it's Alabama, the name, instead of, like, I don't know, some other, like, 4 or 5, like St. Mary's or someone, like
Yeah.
someone who's usually, like, around, like, kind of that seed number, and then NC State instead of, like, an FAU or something like that. So I guess that kind of takes a little bit of the magic out of it. But at the same time, NC State's run has been, one of the more memorable kind of March runs. It seems to be that 11 seed is that lucky number for going on these pretty crazy runs. But I was going to say, too, as well, I feel like the entire year we just touched on, like, it's been UConn and Purdue, at least since, like, UConn kind of got back into the top 10 after a few weeks because, coming into the season, they were expected to take a bit of a step back just because of all they lost.
Yeah.
But then when you go throughout the year, UConn and Purdue mostly, and then I think like mid-January to early February is when Houston started getting lumped into that conversation as well. But here we are with UConn and Purdue, most likely a very good chance of meeting up in the final. Would be pretty shocked if it wasn't those two teams. But with what NC State's doing, I guess I wouldn't be stunned if I would be a little shocked if NC State pulls this off, but I won't be stunned. But we'll start it off with that game. Number 11, NC State out of the South region. What have they won, Joe? 8 games in a row now to get into the tournament and just to get here.
Maybe 6, 4, 9, because they won the 5 and then they've won 4 in the tournament.
Yeah, so insane run there. DJ Burns has captured America's heart throughout the college basketball landscape. They'll be playing number 1 Purdue, going on their revenge tour, looking to avenge last year's 16 seed loss to FDU. Purdue comes into this matchup as an 8.5-point favorite, over under 145.5. This is the first game on TBS for the Final Four, 6:09 tip. Joe, Purdue wins, goes on to play UConn, or do you think NC State's magic kind of continues? And if NC State is able to pull it off, why do you think that they would be able to pull this off at this point?
So honestly, I think just because the fact that they have a big that can match up with Edie. Yeah, Edie still has the height advantage, but Burns' size and physicality, I don't see Edie having his way down low unless the refs are, calling a bunch of fouls early on, which I hope they don't. I hope, if there's like a ticky-tack 50-50 call, they kind of let it ride because I think all of America wants to see two good games. I know the spreads are kind of suggesting that they won't be, but I don't really want to see two blowouts and on a Saturday. But I have Purdue winning this game 83-77. So I think NC State will cover. I might be a square because I feel like everyone's going to be on NC State to cover. But I just think when you have this kind of magic, and I feel like if you look though, 11 seeds kind of tend to get blown out in the Final Four. But I'm just thinking that this magic is going to carry them into the second half. I think it's going to be close. And I think with around, 4 minutes left, Purdue will kind of separate. NC State will need to foul. And I think that NC State will be able to cover that 8.5. But I think Purdue's going to get it done, march on to the national title game. But the one thing, Coyle, like you were saying about how I think NC State can win, I kind of already said with, Burns containing Edie. But NC State has guards also that can match up with Purdue. If this was Purdue from last year, Purdue would be screwed just because they're, Purdue's guards were so young last year. We saw obviously with FDU beating them. But one last thing I will say, it is kind of hilarious that if Purdue loses, they will be knocked out by yet another double-digit seed. Even though it would be the Final Four, I still think that would be pretty funny. But I am going to go with Purdue here, closing out the game late.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about the guards, NC State's guards are definitely more athletic than Purdue's guards. I think they could give them a little bit of trouble in that capacity, but at the same time, like the way Purdue's running right now, they're, in a similar essence of what UConn's being able to do, where Purdue's not the most talented team. UConn's not the most talented team, at least in the entire tournament speaking, but the way that they play together and just the way that they kind of fit the system, it's hard to overcome. That's where kind of the overall top tier talent kind of gets triumphed by the way these guys are playing together on the college floor. When you go to the NBA, I think it's much more star driven. When you look at this, it's much more of a team overall game. I guess before I get into mine, real quick though, Joe, what are your whole thoughts on the Zach Edey foul situation and everyone complaining every single day about it?
Well, first of all, to kind of echo, and part of my take, Big Cat was kind of saying it. If you're a Purdue fan, don't even try to fight it. Just be like, you know what? Yeah, but guess what? We're winning games. Who cares? But I will say it is kind of frustrating at times because I feel like because he is so big, he's getting a lot of calls that if he was DJ Burns' height, kind of would just go on the wayside. Like there were some times in the Duke game, people were bear hugging Burns and they weren't calling anything. But because Edie's so tall and because of the way he has to move, it's very hard not to foul him. So it's like, I get why the refs are calling it, but it is frustrating just the lack of consistency sometimes because there's some points in the game where you have fouls on guards that the refs, you're like, wow, they're really letting them play. Then the moment Edey gets the ball, they don't, they'll call everything on him. And I think, what was it, Coyle? This might have been a little bit of an exaggeration I saw, but was it like 19 fouls were called in total against Edey? And I think he only had one called on him. Like, I know he's very skilled and very good with, how he places his body for his size, but there's no way he's only fouling one time. You know what I mean? Like, there just has to be, a little bit more balance, I feel like, because, you see Edey at times too, when he's clearing space for himself, he's pushing guys, which, happens down low, but you got to kind of give a little bit more of a balance. But I can see why the refs call so many fouls for him.
My thing is that I think if you look every single possession and if you just watch Edey, he gets fouled every single possession before he even catches the ball. Like, even just trying to get position, you could call a foul if you wanted to every single possession. Obviously, they're not going to. But dudes are just draped all over him because that's the only way that they can hope to contain him. And I hate, though, that people are like, oh, this is so bad for the sport and everything. It's an outlier. Like, even when you get guys like like Taco Fall or freaking, I don't know if you remember from UC Irvine, Mamadou Njai. These dudes were big and massive, but they weren't nearly as good or as skilled as Zach Edey is. And people are saying, oh, it's just because he's tall. His improvement from the time that he started in college till now is just insane. And it's like an outlier too, just because you don't get 7'4" freaks that are like this good. Most of the time, they're just big goofs and uncoordinated and not able to do anything. And I also think the tone would be a lot different if he missed these free throws. Like he's such a above average free throw shooter. I think 72% or something he's shooting on the year. If he was missing these free throws, people wouldn't have the same tone because they'd be like, all right, well, that's like, that's the punishment for drawing all these fouls, or the refs calling all these fouls, ball don't lie or whatever. He goes up there and he makes it and people get mad at that. I likened it to the tush push where it was like, it's an unstoppable thing and people are mad because they're not able to stop it. Like, and somebody would call me out on it. I said, if you were able to stop the tush push, like on 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, whatever it is, people wouldn't care about it. But just because it's automatic 90% of the time, people get pissed off about it. Then when you look at Zach Edey, the same thing. People are just mad because you can't contain him without fouling him. And every time you do foul him, he goes and makes the free throws and they continue to win games. Like if people are just getting so mad about that, you have to realize a player like him doesn't come around every single day, every single year. So that's my whole kind of take on the situation where it's like, you have to take a step back and realize this is different. And it's not like, oh, this is going to be the same thing for the sport going forward. You look at freaking Donovan Clingan. He's 2 inches smaller, but he's not that type of player in the post. It's just like frustrating because if Purdue wasn't this good of a team and wasn't winning this much, people wouldn't be, I guess, complaining about it this often.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The tush push is like a very good comparison. Because as annoying, as annoyed that people would get at it, it's like you have to stop it. At some point, you can complain all you want. Go out and stop it. If you stop it, then it's not a problem anymore. Mm-hmm. See, I've just never been in a position to root for a team really that kind of has that unstoppable play, unless UConn can, break out 30-0 runs every game. But the Jets are certainly not coming up with an unstoppable play anytime soon. But no, I agree with you. It's, stop it. If you want to find a way to stop Edey, there's enough good coaches out there that someone somewhere has found a way to stop him. If FDU can do it, maybe the secret is everyone just needs to be 5'10". Yeah. That might just be the secret. You have to be so small that he doesn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. That's the only way I can think of. I don't know.
But back to the matchup for it, I'm going to go with Purdue, and I'll take them to cover. I'm going to go 80-70, so Purdue minus 8.5 over 145.5. I think this is a game where I'm going to definitely take a swing on NC State first half spread. I think it's a spot where they kind of hang around tough. But, if Edey, after all that talk, does get DJ Burns in foul trouble, that is certainly a blow to their front court depth. On the defensive side, just in terms of matching up size-wise with him. They can throw Diarra at him too. But then offensively, we saw that Duke game, how much of that offense kind of rolls with him. And just like his efficiency, just seemed like every shot in that second half he was throwing up was going in. So when he's not on the floor, it's a completely different team. And like we were saying at the beginning, I think we're just on that collision course for this UConn versus Purdue game at the end of the day. So I'm going to go with Purdue to win this one. I think they just kind of put their foot on the gas in the second half and step up a little bit. So I'm going to go 80-70 Purdue winning. So Purdue minus 8.5 in the over of 145.5. But I do think NC State makes it a ball game at the beginning. All right, we go to the second game now. While Joe's out of the chat, we have UConn versus Alabama. Number 4, Alabama there out of the West region versus number 1, UConn. UConn is an 11.5 point favorite in this matchup. Over under sitting at 160.5. And just the tear that UConn has been on since that Creighton loss where they lost 85-66. They've won every single game since then by double digits, except the St. John's game in the Marquette game. They own a 24-point win over Villanova, a 30-point win over Seton Hall. They own then the 7-point win over Marquette, a 14-point win over Providence, a 27-point win over Xavier, 5-point win over St. John's, a 16-point win over Marquette. And then you go to the tournament. a 40-point win over Stetson, a 17-point win over Northwestern, a 30-point win over San Diego State, and a 25-point win over Illinois. Just the tear that they've kind of been on since that Creighton loss is just pretty unreal, Joe. I guess before you get into your take and why you're going to have UConn moving on, what, in your opinion, just makes them so hard to stop, and what is kind of the best way to slow this team down and stop them?
I mean, it's kind of a textbook, like, cheesy cookie cutter answer, but it's their depth and, like, their balance. Like, they don't rely on one or two guys. I mean, in the game against Illinois, Newton, who you could argue might be the best, the best player, second best player, but like the leader of the team along with Klingon, Newton was silent, but Klingon went off. You have games where Klingon struggles, but the guards back it up. Caravan is always there, who can hit a couple big threes. It's just the balance that this team has. And then you have Samson Johnson coming off the bench, who can deliver one or two dunks a game that make you, like, that just brings so much momentum back to you. DR is a freak. It's just the balance that this team has. Honestly, the only hope you really can have, which is kind of why Bama scares me, and we'll get to it in a minute, with UConn's 3 losses, if you get hot from 3, that's really the UConn's lost to Seton Hall, Kansas, Creighton. I think all 3 of those games, those teams shot over 50 or like at 50% from 3. They were all on the road as well, so that definitely doesn't help. But really, I mean, I guess if you like, the one thing that I think Purdue would match up well with is that Edey and Klingon would neutralize each other. Because even if Klingon, was having a bad game, he would still typically have the advantage over whoever he was playing, besides like Kalkbrenner or, one of these other elite bigs. But I think that's why Purdue matches up best with them. Bama, doesn't play defense. UConn does play defense. I know, Bama's defensive metrics look decent, but that's only because they're running constantly up and down the court. If Bama does get cold and they got to rely on playing defense, I don't know if they'll be able to do that for a full 40 minutes. But I think just trying to truly eliminate one option for UConn and then just playing good defense, you can, make it a dogfight. That's kind of the one way I would try to do it. I wouldn't be like Brad Underwood and just go at Klingon the whole game, because that clearly didn't work. But there's really not that many ways you can truly stop UConn. It's kind of like what they said when Johnny Manziel was running around. Like, you can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him. That's kind of like what you have with this UConn team right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm going to take UConn to win this one, 85-73. So I will go UConn covering that 11.5, and I will go with the under of 160.5. I think if UConn's winning this game, it's probably a lower score and kind of staying under that total. But here, I guess, is my kind of like betting advice for this one and my rationale for this game. If you think that Alabama is going to cover that 11.5, I would say, if you want to put a little bit on that, do that. But I would say just take the money line at that point. I would say bet that at plus 525 instead. And then maybe even like do what I did with that Auburn versus Yale game. Like, all right, I took Auburn to cover for 2 units, but then I took Yale money line at like plus 400 for 1 unit. Still wind up winning money in that game, but obviously dependent on either the one team covering the spread or the outright money line winner. But I'd say bet Alabama plus 525 money line, because the only way that they stay in this game is, like you said, Joe, is if they go nuclear from 3, because they played the most kind of boomer bust system, 16-1 this year when they score 90 plus. So obviously when they're getting up and down the court and they're making their shots, they're a really tough beat. But when you play that way and you're not going to kind of take the foot off the gas, and regardless, you're just going to keep going. Like, even if Alabama starts off that game 0-12 and they're only down like 4 or 5 points, they're not going to be like, all right, we did this. We're just going to try and make this half-court game and keep it close. No, they're going to continue running and gunning up and down the court. If they're making their threes, they're going to have a good chance to win the game. If you think they're just going to maybe like hang around, they're going to be right there, kind of blah, blah, blah. That I think you just have to take the risk there on the money line instead, because if they're not making their threes, they're going to get ran off the court. So like I said, they're not stopping the way that they play. They don't kind of curtail to the way other teams play. It's all about them at the end of the day. So I think they're just going to continue to do that run and gun. And if they are able to get nuclear in this one, they're going to be able to hang around and give themselves a shot to win. So I think it's kind of worth taking the risk there at the plus 525 money line, rather than the minus 110 for the spread. I guess what are your kind of thoughts on that logic behind that? And also, I was listening to something earlier. In UConn's 3 losses this year, the other team has made Tristan Newton into a scorer. They've actually been a lot better when he doesn't really score in that high of volume. The Kansas game, he had 31. The Creighton game, he had 27. And the Seton Hall game, he had 16. So he's averaging probably around 24, 25 points a game or something when in their 3 losses. So I guess kind of making him more of a scorer and taking it away from that whole team-centric thing that we were talking earlier. I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that one, I'm not smart enough to put into proper words. And like, it makes sense when you have a guy that's like a natural facilitator and that's kind of his main role, and you take him out of his, his comfort zone, even though, Newton's putting up 20, 30 a game. That's also kind of, in a way, eliminating everyone else around him. Because like I said earlier, and that's kind of, another way, Coyle, you could say that you could beat UConn if you make them, like, they turn into a team that focuses too much on one guy. The whole aspect about UConn is that how good they are as a team and how cohesive they are as a unit. If you make them kind of go away from the style that's gotten them there, you could see late, maybe Newton is locked up and he has to make a pass, or, and one of these other guys just hasn't had the ball that much. Not saying that they'll be cold, but they're kind of just out of their rhythm. And, late in the game, they might not be able to hit that big 3 or, make the run that they need to kind of close the game out. So that definitely is a way that they can, be stopped for sure. But just to say my score quick, I'm going UConn 91, Bama 86. I think if UConn wants to win this game, I think Bama is going to come out hot from 3. I'm actually very nervous about this game as a UConn fan. I might be texting, one of you guys, Coyle, to put a couple bucks on Bama money line because I have UConn to cover the spread right now as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think Bama's going to come out hot. Like, this is a game I wouldn't be shocked if there's at the 10-minute mark in the second half, Bama's up or, UConn's only up by like 2 or 3. This is going to be a really close game, real fun game. I think this game's going to be more, fun to watch than the Purdue NC State game. But I still think UConn will be able to move on. They will be able to use the travel woes in their favor and the lack of, hotel space. Some of these hotel rooms that these UConn players are getting. DJ Burns has like a massive suite. And I think they got Caravan, sharing a room with Cam Spencer. I know that's kind of what they do. But it was pretty funny looking at, some of these UConn players getting single beds. And, like NC State, all these guys are getting big doubles and, king-size beds. But I am going to go with UConn to advance the national title game.
All right, so that sets us up with a UConn versus Purdue final. I don't know what the exact projection would be on that one, but I think we actually might be able to find something on Haslametrics of what the projection would be. But I guess, Joe, while I hunt for that, give me your thoughts overall on that national title. You think it would be a ball game? You think UConn would roll? Or you think Purdue has a chance to pull off the upset there?
I mean, I definitely think Purdue would have the shot to pull off the upset. I have UConn winning 81-79, actually. I believe it'll be a very close game. I think we'll get an instant classic in the national title game if this is the case. Because of kind of what I was already saying, Klingon and Edey neutralize each other. I still think Edey, I'm picking Edey at the end of the day just because he will still have, a couple inches on Klingon. I do think, is a little bit more skilled with how he positions himself. Klingon, I think, will be much better in the NBA just because I think he's a better athlete. But Klingon, at the end of the day, is still only a sophomore. Feels like, this UConn team, just because of the run they went on last year and how deep they went, feels like Klingon's been there longer than 2 years. But, Edey does have that experience. And Purdue is coming out. They want to win a national title. They're pissed off about what happened last year, losing to FDU. We saw Virginia use that motivation and go all the way and win a national title. So it wouldn't even shock me if Purdue did win. However, I am going to go with UConn here. At the end of the day, I just think they kind of have more guys around Klingon. It was kind of like how I was predicting Creighton to go and beat Purdue if they had gotten there, just because I feel like they have more guys around Kalkbrenner. I think UConn at the end of the day having more, guards and wings and more depth than Purdue. If someone can get Edey into foul trouble, which Doesn't really happen that often. But if Edey gets into foul trouble, I think Purdue will have a hard time staying in that game with UConn. But I am going to go with UConn here to cover. I think we're going to get a great game, great way to cap off the college basketball season.
Yeah, you got a 81-79. Has some metrics, projects a bit of a lower scoring game, but they're projecting UConn 73, Purdue 71. So probably like a UConn minus 2.5. I think, especially if UConn blows out Alabama, I think that number is going to be closer to like 5.5, 6 come Monday night. But like you said, Joe, if this is the matchup, regardless of the outcome, these have been the two best teams in college basketball for 90% of the season. It's a matchup I think we deserve, and I think it would be an awesome game for these two teams to meet up on Monday night. I would roll with UConn as well. I'll go UConn 80, Purdue 73. I think it is a tight back and forth battle throughout, but I think UConn just has a few too many playmakers down the stretch, and they're just playing at a little bit of a different level right now. I feel like so much people hate Purdue, and just, I guess, basically what we were talking about with the Edey stuff, but as well as kind of just, I don't know, just the way that they play sometimes. I feel like they're not a very likable team from the outside. And I know you're a UConn fan, but I'm kind of rooting for them. I feel like they've been kind of crapped on so much, and Edey especially has just been hated on so much. But this dude is going to be a 2-time National Player of the Year. If he's able to cement his legacy after losing last year as a 16 seed, and for a kid that was, ranked in the 300s in recruiting, and he's a 2-time National Player of the Year, Final Four, most outstanding player, and a national champion, he'll go down as one of the, I think, 5-10 greatest college basketball players of all time at the end of the day. Like, he's just been such a dominant force in the game these past 2 years. So he has a real chance, especially if he beats this UConn team, to top it all off, to really cement his legacy as one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. So if these two teams do meet up, I hope it's just an awesome game and it lives up to the hype, kind of unlike that Gonzaga Baylor one did. But I think at the end of the day, UConn's just on a little bit of a different level right now. So I'm going to take them to win that game and most likely cover the spread, whatever the number is when it comes out. But Joe, that'll do it for another year here on Beef Up Front. College basketball done, college football done, and like you said, only 142 days now to week 0.
Yeah, it was 142. Let me make sure. Let me see if I still have it up. I believe it was 142 days. Yep, 142 days. Week 0, I was already doing a little look ahead the other night because I don't know what to do now that college basketball is winding down and I have like weeknights of no sports besides, having a gun to my head watching the Mets all the time. But week 0, not the best. We only got 2 FBS games, against each other. We do get a great Delaware State-Hawaii matchup, though. I'm looking forward to that.
Wow.
But, we get Florida State, Georgia Tech, SMU, Nevada, and then there's Montana State, New Mexico, Delaware State, Hawaii. So we'll have a little week 0, season preview, make picks for those games. But it is crazy now. This is the 4th year. We started this, our junior, really the first radio show was right before COVID.
Yeah.
I think I had to think of being like, it's just like the flu, we'll be fine. And here we are. But it's crazy. This will be the 4th full season we've done.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for tuning in along the way, whether it was an Instagram video, a Twitter video, a stream, a YouTube video. As always, appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you next season.